We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with Tim Donner, longtime host of this here Liberty Nation radio show. In the earlier part, we talked about bracing for the 2023 Congress and what shape that might take. Now I want to discuss what happens if Democrats fail to take any seats in the Senate. Now, Tim, VP Kamala Harris, you recently said that the Dems need to win 2 seats to pass their whole legislative agenda and package. Does this mean that the Democrats have essentially given up entirely on Senators Manchin and Sinema?
Hardly, because they kept pounding on these 2 relatively moderate Democrats for months and months and months on end, and they finally wore them down, admittedly to the tune of only, $700 billion instead of over $6 trillion, which is where they started with their Build Back Better agenda. So, no, they've hardly given in because they think that in the end, they can appeal to the party loyalty of Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, who, after all, got on board with that final, I'm still going to call it Build Back Better plan, because it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a joke and, frankly, an insult to the American people when something that has nothing to do with inflation is called that nakedly. But that's up to the people to decide. It's
somewhat Orwellian, I would suggest, this use of language.
Certainly is, but I think they feel, Mark, that they can appeal ultimately the party loyalty of Manchin and Sinema and get them to agree to something, even if it's not all that they want.
Well, let's consider the other position then. What if the Senate swings to the GOP, even by just 1 seat? What does this mean for Joe Biden and his continued Build Back Better agenda, which is really all his legislation appears to be?
Well, I think he'll then narrow down his public face to continuing his warning about the extremism on the other side of the Republican Party. The MAGA Republicans are controlling the party. He's, anything he sends, if he loses the House and certainly the Senate, for sure, is going to be dead on arrival, DOA. He won't be able to get anything done legislatively. Honestly, even if they hold the Senate and lose the House, which is the most, I think, realistically, the most hopeful prospect for them. So he will have, as Barack Obama did after he got shellacked in the midterms in 2014, he'll have his pen and his phone, and he'll have his moral authority, which I don't think amounts to a whole lot at this point. If he loses the Senate, though, it will hamper his ability to fill out federal judicial vacancies. He's not going to get as many judges passed and might have trouble getting any Supreme Court justice through if, in fact, a vacancy comes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you say, we all expect the GOP to take the House. But if they do get the Senate, we're looking at quite a lot of attempts at legislation from the Republicans, aren't we? And obviously, they're almost certainly not going to get a supermajority. So do you think Joe Biden will end up vetoing any legislation that comes out of a Republican-led both chambers?
Certainly, Mark, 100%. His agenda will be dead on arrival. Look, there's been some complaints about Republicans in recent surveys that they aren't presenting their own specific agenda for what they would do other than not being Democrats, much like Joe Biden was simply not Donald Trump in 2020. Well, the Republicans think they're going to answer that next week, September 19th. Kevin McCarthy, the prospective House Speaker, will release something called the Commitment to America, which is based on Newt Gingrich's famous 1994 contract with America that won the Republicans a House for the first time in decades. What they're going to unveil specifically, we don't know yet, but it's going to focus on basically on strength, on safety, on freedom, and accountability, and specifics within there. So they'll make specific pledges, and we'll see whether that's enough to whet people's appetite for what they can expect other than no more Democratic leadership. But it will be, I think, a mostly united wall of Republicans. The big one that's hard to figure, frankly, Mark, is this abortion bill that was proposed by Lindsey Graham, nationalizing the issue, much like the Democrats did, only with an opposite approach. Democrats wanted to make all abortions essentially legal anytime, anywhere, for any reason, whereas Lindsey Graham wants to do 15 weeks nationally. That's a let's say, a risky and a bold maneuver as to how it affects the electorate, because abortion and fear of Trump are really the only two big things that Democrats have going for them at this point.
Yeah, it seems that if Lindsey Graham had not proposed anything and then put it through if and when the Republicans take back control of Congress, it might have been, let's call it a more palatable time for voters to look at. Well, here's at least some kind of, for those voters who want some kind of federal level law on abortion, that might have been the right time to do it. But going into an election, it almost seems that after sending the decision back to the states, it seems that Lindsey Graham is going against what many conservatives consider a Supreme Court win, isn't it?
Absolutely. And he's inflaming the Democrat base. He's energizing them because the pro-life people got what they wanted. They don't have to show up at the polls to express their support. But Democrats, liberals, feel they have to show up at the polls to demonstrate their outrage at this constitutional right established for 50 years being stripped from them. Look, this is, the fact that Roe v. Wade was thrown out altogether has elicited sort of extreme reactions on both sides. Democrats want to make all abortions legal. A lot of Republicans or conservatives want to make them all illegal. I think the issue has to sort of find some balance, but it's not going to find it with a highly explosively controversial proposal like Lindsey Graham's.
Yeah, especially just 2 months out from an election. Tim Donner, thank you ever so much.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Remember, you can tune in for Liberty Nation on KFOM 1240 AM out of Park Hills, Missouri. Coming up later in the show, we discuss the paradox of incarceration. But up now, after this short break, we figure out just how bad the latest economic news truly is. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe space.
You only did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.